kia ora koutou, and welcome to this whirlwind presentation. It will be whirlwind. That will look at how we have operationalised evidence-based policing here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Probably fair to say my personal journey around crime science, problem solving and evidence-based policing started in 1999. So for me, the journey's probably been a 20-year one. In New Zealand, the Evidence-Based Policing Centre was created in December 2017 and operationalised in 2019 by bringing together and repurposing a range of largely existing police functions, and it's rapidly established itself as a positive reputation for the quality of its insights and analysis across the organisation. However, the journey started, I guess, long before that, under the commissionership of the previous Commissioner, Mike Bush, where we saw evidence-based policing appear on our business, that's the New Zealand Police Strategic Plan, for the first time. And it was at the heart of our transformation program at that time. Our business has matured since 2015, and I would say that EBP is no longer an add-on. It's woven through our business, and it's reflected in the overarching principles associated with policing by consent. So I think we've designed a world-class evidence-based policing centre for the future, and we've partnered with organisations who share our aspirations to be the safest country. It didn't happen by accident. We had a plan, a blueprint for EBP developed over the establishment period between 2017 2018, and we'd be happy to share the blueprint with any of you. Just make contact with the team here. The blueprint itself was recognised as a finalist at the World Class Policing Awards held in London in 2020. And when we operationalised the EBPC in 2019, I appointed the then Superintendent, now Assistant Commissioner, Bruce O'Brien, as the inaugural Director of the Centre. I have to say, Bruce was a fantastic appointment, an operational police officer with great credibility, but also a passion for learning and applied research. And I think this combination was absolutely fundamental to our early success. Bruce was instrumental in bringing teams and partners together to operate as a centre so we could begin enabling the wider business of policing. I'll now hand over to Bruce to continue the story. Bruce.
Kia ora koutou, and thanks Mark for that introduction, and just to acknowledge Mark's support for the evidence-based policing that we have in New Zealand Police. He's been fundamental in our success, so just an acknowledgement for Mark as well. I can't tell you how privileged I feel and felt at the time to be appointed as the inaugural Director for evidence-based policing for New Zealand Police, and that came at the end of some study that I'd done under Professor Larry Sherman at the University of Cambridge. So I was in a fantastic position to be able to use my learning and put it in place for what I'd learned around EBP. If we could just go to the next slide, please. EBP involves generating evidence, synthesising it, translating it and using it. In early March 2019, we set about operationalising EBPC, and almost immediately, under extremely sad circumstances, the EBPC was put through its paces following the Christchurch mosque attacks of the 15th of March 2019, where 51 Kiwis lost their lives and 14 more were seriously injured. We were able to provide within 48 hours of the attack 2 initial evidence scans that informed the Commissioner and the Police Executive at that time on the evidence relating to general arming of police and community reassurance post-terror attack. This was really important in setting the tone and style of our policing response at the time, and I generally believe it demonstrated the benefits of an evidence-based approach to inform and to support decision-making. If you could just go to the next slide, please. We have a prospectus that we launched, and it was really important for the evidence-based Policing Centre to promote an understanding of its offer to police, what products and services we could support, and the make-up of the centre. We did this by producing our first prospectus, which was and continues to be shared widely both in New Zealand and internationally, and is used by our people as a conversation starter. I also believe that the prospectus was a key component in our journey of embedding the Evidence-Based Policing Centre into the organisation. The checkpoint application serves as a digital aid memoir for staff, replacing outdated notebook cards. It provides checklists across almost all areas of frontline policing to support the Commissioner's priority of delivering the services New Zealanders expect and deserve. It also equips and enables our staff to be safe and feel safe, with checklists to support dynamic assessment of threat, harm and risk to the situation that they are dispatched to. The checkpoint app was also instrumental in the response and recovery to and from the Christchurch terror attacks. A lot of the design of the checkpoint is based off Atul Gawande's work captured in his book, The Checklist Manifesto. The EBPC portal starts to deliver on putting the best available evidence at the fingertips of our people. The portal runs out of the Evidence-Based Policing Knowledge and Information team based at the Police College. The portal provides a single point of entry to evidence-based policing research produced locally and internationally. The content is both internal New Zealand police research and evaluations, as well as material from other New Zealand agencies, overseas police forces, published academic literature, organisational reports, research briefs and grey literature. It is designed to assist New Zealand police make informed and evidence-based decisions supporting our mission to be the safest country. I'll now pass over to the current Director of Evidence-Based Policing, Simon Williams, and he's going to take us through the whirlwind look at some of the research projects that we've led, influenced and partnered on. Simon, over to you.
Kia ora, thanks Bruce. Tēnā koutou. Ko Simon Williams, toku ingoa, no Birmingham, England, aho. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Simon Williams, Director of the Evidence-Based Policing Centre, and for those of you who remember from day one, the standing anchor from our disrupted and COVID-interrupted day one. I'm really pleased that we've got Julian back with us, I can tell you that much. So let's start with a look at the EBP network leads. We have what I'm sure is a world-first dedicated EBP network lead team. They are the most incredibly talented police officers and police staff. Persistence, patience and problem solving, I think, are the 3 Ps that I'd use to describe them. They have and continue to be our Google Translate function between the EBPC and our 12 police districts across New Zealand. We've heard the phrase paper to pavement a lot over the last few days, and that's what this team do for us. They are the Gary Linekers, for those of you who remember football in the 80s and 90s, or our number 9s of the team. We've heard a lot about place-based policing in the last few days. The evidence base is extremely promising in the area of hotspots policing. We heard from Larry Sherman in his presentation this morning the importance of that, focusing on police partner problem solving on the small areas that suffer the greatest crime and harm. We partnered with 2 districts to robustly test this for the very first time. Why is this important? Well, we must know what works when it comes to our everyday policing. We heard from the UPD panel discussion yesterday how important this is, and patrol is one of those things that we deliver on the most. How do we know when we've delivered just enough patrol time to prevent crime, but not intrude on people's liberty in a way that damages our legitimacy as police? Well, testing, of course. So we attempted to replicate one of the most robust tests of small increases of just 15 minutes of patrol time, the Perth study that Larry referred to in his earlier discussion. But we failed in our implementation. Dr. Robin Milden talked to us yesterday about the importance of tracking or auditing, which we did. We just didn't feed back well enough on the days. We weren't asking cops to do the extra patrol, so actually ended up with the same time, a number of visits across both treatment and control days. So look out for take 2 coming next year, but we did learn an awful lot from that. October 2019 through April 2020 saw New Zealand pilot ARTs, Armed Response Teams. EBPC were asked to evaluate the impact, which was quite challenging due to the tight timeframes for implementation. However, we were able to track the activities of the teams involved and importantly investigate the opinions of our community and our people. Our report was detailed and openly critiqued this pilot. This evaluation supported the Commissioner's decision to withdraw ARTs, draw breath and thoughtfully redesign how we deploy our resources to keep both the community and importantly our own people safe. We developed the strategic research agenda in 2019. launching in early 2020 as COVID-19 discovered the world. This helps the EBPC, New Zealand Police, our partners and academic institutions across New Zealand and beyond focus their work towards these research priorities. The four main themes that you can see here are the building blocks of the foundation stones we are laying to drive multidisciplinary collaboration research that makes a real difference. That strategic research agenda really is the voice of our people as well. On the subject of COVID-19, we seconded the EBPC physical location to the all-of-government response team, who were stood up within about a week of the first cases making their way into New Zealand. The collaborative layout of the space that we've put together and leadership of the centre enabled dozens of government agencies to come together and lead our national response to the pandemic. We talk a lot about the importance of resilience in policing, particularly in the research space within policing, which is still relatively new as a discipline. We have and continue to provide the business and sector partners with data and insights covering demand, compliance and checkpoint activity around COVID. In particular, our data science team has produced, using the SAS software, a national critical command information platform that is still used daily. That's really enabled our response to COVID. As we move through the first months of COVID-19 and families were forced to spend more time together, globally, there was a real evidenced concern that incidents of family harm were increasing. The EBPC supported and enabled, with the support of KPMG Australia, the four main societies of EBP to come together and discuss the common issues we were facing. The EBPC worked across all four societies to pull together a high-level overview of evidence-based command information on family harm strategies. This has been a real catalyst for the four societies to talk about how we collaborate in the future, and you'll hear more on this as we move through the day. An important goal for any police agency is to reduce crime and harm. Analysts play a crucial role in identifying and understanding crime problems causing harm to our communities, and to help decision makers with resource allocation, and of course to understand whether what we're doing actually works. This process often involves measuring crime in terms of counts or volumes, but these crime counts are quite a blunt instrument. Not all crimes, after all, are created equally. Counts alone fail to capture the relative harm that any given crime causes. So enter the New Zealand Crime Harm Index that uses New Zealand sentencing data to calculate equivalent prison days as a consistent weighting across offence types, providing an additional lens that enriches our analysis of problems and lets us take a different look at the outcomes of our effort. These are just a very small snapshot of some of the projects we have or are working on. I'm really proud of the partnerships we've created across a number of the universities and functions across the wider sector. We're definitely stronger and deliver more when we partner with independent thinkers outside of policing. It's so easy for those in policing to be drawn to the inside view. That outside view is just as important. In response to the fleeing driver report published in 2018, the EBPC conducted 6 tranches of research to support the recommendations made. In particular, recommendation 8, which was improving understanding of fleeing driver offending. The research found that motivations and experiences of participants were relatively consistent across age groups, and that there were no motivations or themes identified specifically for people of specific ethnicities, although Māori and Pasifika participants were more likely to report previous negative experiences with police and general anti-police attitudes as primary motivations for fleeing. So this finding is also backed up by the literature review that was conducted as part of that research. I think this applied research is incredibly important because it allows New Zealand Police to take an evidence-informed approach to policy, practice and procedure changes made in the Fleeing Drivers Action Plan. The findings from this research have been included in officer training modules throughout the driver training and are also informing joint work with Oranga Tamariki. It's also important, I think, because it highlights the impact that police can have when they are not being perceived as being procedurally just. Methamphetamine research. Tranche 1 represents an unprecedented collaboration between police, social sector agencies, iwi and private sector partners, forming a collective view of the current understanding of methamphetamine harm specific to New Zealand. With wastewater testing detecting meth in almost every community, tested during every day of the week, New Zealand ranks amongst one of the highest for mass loads internationally. A snapshot here of what Tranche 3 is starting to tell us. And this compares a large cohort of offenders charged with meth offences compared with a large cohort who are charged with similar offences minus the meth-related offending. This tells us that methamphetamine offenders committed over 5 times more offences, caused over 7 times more crime harm, as measured by the New Zealand Crime Harm Index, suffered nearly 2 times more victimisations and suffered over 2 times more victimisation harm than other offenders. This really does begin to shine a light on just how damaging this drug really is and why taking an evidence-based approach or approaches to desistance, deterrence, centred around a health-based healing approach for end users is so important. And Larry made mention of that in his previous talk. Our service design team have fast become our human-centred research team, and on the screen you can see some of the work they're doing in the rural policing space. Working with our research and evaluation teams, they are highly skilled at running focus groups, interviews, workshops, and really bringing the lived experiences of our people, their families, and our community to life. As I said, the Rural Policing Project is a great example of this work with the creation of personas to tell the story. And we've got John Stevenson, who manages and leads that team, to thank for the wonderful artwork in these slides today, so thank you, John. As well as co-hosting the conference, we're committed to delivering against what we here in New Zealand call the 4th T of evidence-based policing, that of telling. We know how powerful storytelling can be. In policing, we live and breathe these stories every day that connect us to each other and the service that we deliver. We partner annually with the University of Waikato to deliver a shorter online conference that showcases our work together. That's been really successful at getting the message out there. We are developing a cohort of internships as well across a number of universities, which we'd like to grow in the coming years. These are just a few of our talented interns who have spent time working on really important projects such as Te Pairanga and Hotspots Policing, to name a few. Thank you to all our interns. We've recently launched the New Zealand Operational Performance Framework that allows New Zealand Police to better understand what's driving our demand, where and who's causing the greatest harm, what activities we've mapped against safe homes, roads and communities, and how the levers we can pull as police impact on intermediate outcomes and our goal of being the safest country. It's taken about 9 months to develop, co-designed with our people who have been with us along the way from the front line all the way up to the Commissioner, with the support of KPMG in Wellington. This MVP that we've launched will grow over time and include a range of measures that help us better understand how we target resources to achieve better outcomes for New Zealand. As we've heard, understanding policing delivery is a huge undertaking by New Zealand Police, and one that EBPC is already and will continue to support with the provision of data, evidence and insight, and of course the thought leadership that comes from such strength in the diversity of our people across the centre. We'll also support and enable the testing of interventions to prevent and mitigate bias, and that target improved delivery of policing service to New Zealanders. The Reframe programme of work is another significant undertaking being driven from within. This programme overlaps but focuses on broader issues of frontline policing practice. We'll be supporting this programme in the coming months, particularly in the areas of supported decision making and procedural justice. Over the past year, there's been a great deal of work undertaken by Police's Frontline Safety Improvement Programme, who listened to more than 1,250 staff around their concerns and ideas to improve staff safety. We've engaged with Māori, Pacific and ethnic community leaders, taken on board feedback from those who shared thoughts on armed response teams, as well as the best available evidence on general arming of police. This engagement's informed the development of a new tactical response model. The model's designed around enhancing frontline training, improving frontline access to specialist capability, and strengthening risk-based deployment and technology. And I'm really pleased to say that the EBPC have been asked to evaluate the impact of the tactical response model. The team are working on that in the background as we speak. I'm really pleased to say that we've engaged the very first senior Māori research advisor. Dr. Steve Ellis is actually here with us, supporting us in the studio with questions. He's made a significant contribution to building the cultural capability of our people through daily interactions and a series of workshops that he's delivering within policing that feature some of the most prominent kaupapa Māori researchers in New Zealand. This appointment, I think, has really strengthened our relationship with Māori, Pacific and ethnic services, who we want to walk side by side with as we embed and expand an evidence-based approach to problem solving and decision making here in New Zealand. And of course, we're here. We're co-hosting. I'm very pleased to co-host the ANZSEBP annual conference. We're really privileged to have the opportunity to contribute and support to the society in this way this year. Seriously though, this whirlwind tour of our work is just the tip of the iceberg, and it really only scratches the surface of the work and achievements in supporting New Zealand Police that the team at the centre have done in the last 30 months. We've got a seat at the table. We can't get carried away though. We've got to stay grounded, I think, continue to provide the best data, evidence and insights to our people that drive the 40s of targeting crime and harm, testing current practice, comparing that to alternatives, tracking our outputs and outcomes of policing delivery, and telling the stories of that time we didn't make a difference, telling a story of that time that we wanted to make a difference, didn't quite get it right, but tried again, this time reducing crime and harm as we did so. Following this reflection on our progress as an EBPC, we're taking stock of our roadmap, and we'll work over the coming months to refresh this for the next 30 months and beyond. I'd certainly like to see the EBPC strengthen existing partnerships with academic institutions in New Zealand and abroad, build stronger links with the Royal New Zealand Police College, Māori Pacific Ethnic Services, and of course other groups under our umbrella that combine support the deployment and delivery of policing across New Zealand. Thanks.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for that, as we say, short journey, but very precise and concise presentation of the journey so far. So to all three of you, thank you very much, Bruce, Mark, and of course Simon. We do have some time for questions if you'd like to post some. One that comes to mind is for others who are looking to either begin the journey themselves, would be interested to know what the challenges in the establishment phase might have been, potentially. Mark and Bruce as the inaugural director, and how you were able to deal with those as you were establishing the EBPC.
Most of the audience will know policing is a fairly hierarchical business, and you do need support from the senior leadership of the organisation. I think it's quite difficult to make progress if you don't have support from the executive leadership, and I think helping leaders understand the impact and value of an evidence-based policing approach is sort of fundamentally important and needs to be done well. I think the second thing probably is most people have some resource within the organisation. It might be reasonably dispersed or fragmented. One of the techniques that we applied was to bring together existing capabilities and then repurpose them. That worked quite well, and it meant that we weren't looking for large amounts of new investment. We were trying to use what we've already got, and then we were able to build, from that. And probably the third thing I would probably highlight, this has to be relevant to the delivery of policing services. And we took some early decisions to provide insights around evidence-based policing for frontline staff. And Bruce mentioned the checkpoint application. And that was something that was applied to all police mobile phones after the 15th of March attacks in Christchurch, actually. And what it did, it provided opportunities to support frontline staff to do their work. And we branded it as an evidence-based policing initiative, which effectively meant every time somebody went into the application and opened it, the EBP brand came up in front of a frontline officer. And that kind of subliminally, I think, helped people connect impact and value with this notion of something called evidence-based policing, and I think was very helpful. And I'm sure Bruce would have a view on that.
Yeah, I was going to ask Bruce as the inaugural director, actually, yeah. Bruce?
Look, I agree completely with what Mark said on those 3 points. I think the other thing is to really remind everybody within a police organisation, this is not about replacing their experience. This is about complementing that, and I think that's where evidence-based policing really helps in policing. It complements the wide range of experience that everybody has. I think the other thing is bringing our frontline people along on the journey has been critically important in our success, identifying opportunities to make their day-to-day business easier and obviously their role in reducing harm. And I think there was a really good example of that yesterday with the Lumi drug scan. That was an idea that came from a frontline workshop, and I think that's really, really key, is to bring frontline practitioners along. And probably the last thing I'd say is the relationship with academics. I've only ever had positive experiences with academics. They're there to help, support, and their knowledge is valuable in what we need to do to better reduce harm in our communities, but problem solve those complex problems that we've heard across the board in this conference to date.
I dare suggest the appointment of the inaugural director to be an assistant commissioner probably wasn't in the plan, Mark, but there you go. It's allowed for Simon to come in and be the director. Simon, you mentioned the focus on the 4Ts going forward, and I know there's still some challenges for EBPC going forward as well. What might some of these specific projects, if you can talk about one in particular or give an example of that you might be focusing on in the next 30 months and forward from there?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Well, you saw on the slides before the number of projects listed across the last couple of years. I think one of the projects that really excites me is the bail notice project. So that was led with our EBP network lead team, who partnered with the Behavioural Science Service from Ministry of Justice to redesign a form that we give to everybody that we charge and bail to appear before court. A simple redesign that reduced the reading age, I think from 14 down to 9 years, in a small, controlled pilot, reduced the number of people who failed to appear at court that first time. We estimate that if we scale that up nationally, that would prevent over 2,000 people from failing to appear at court. The knock-on impact, as we know, a warrant gets issued, our cops knock on the door, usually when they've got some downtime at 3 o'clock in the morning. We know the effect that an impact that can have on relationships with both the person that's wanted and their families. We talk about procedural justice being so important. It's something that can really harm that. We've just launched in the last month a national rollout of that form, but we're doing it in a staggered way. That means that we'll be able to test the impact across the course of the next year.
Which also aligns nicely with what Larry was talking about earlier in his presentation as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much to all of you. Bruce joining us from Tāmaki. We hope you're safe and well there, Bruce. Thank you very much for joining us, and also to Mark and Simon. I know you're going to hang in for the next session as well, so thank you both very much.